There's so much more to come, it's not over yet. And you know I still am.
Wonderful. Oh, there we go. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I might kick off by making the acknowledgement of country, and Cloudwerx acknowledges and pays respects to the past, present, future, and traditional custodians and elders of the nation, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here on the and the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation, where we are. So I'm going to only say a few words because the heat coming off these two, which wait till you see what they've got in store, is going to be wild. But if this is your first event for WerxFest, welcome. This is the crescendo of the week. And if you've actually participated in some of the other webinars that we've had and events, thank you very much. We've had, I think, 120 individual businesses register for this event, and hundreds of other registrations across the sessions. And WerxFest, what is WerxFest? Guys, that's an in-joke. WerxFest is really a showcase and the culmination of so much talent we got at this place. I probably should introduce me. I'm Toby, CEO of Cloudwerx, by the way. We'll talk about Cloudwerx and these guys in a sec. But WerxFest really is something special and something that we've created, and it's obviously the brainchild of Dee and Viv. Thank you, big thanks for driving force behind this and being a little bit crazy about what we decided to do and try and pull off. But last year was a birthday party, and this year's a bit bigger, and it's going to be bigger every year. But so the fundamentals of Cloudwerx too, and what we do from the beginning with Chris, Rog here, and Miha, the original founders, transform business and create partnerships for life. I mean, that is fundamental about what we do, and it's no different now. With everything that you're going to see today, it's still relevant, it's still important. And to actually achieve all the stuff that we want to do, you have to work together. You have to have great relationships and open and authentic relationships, because it ain't a straight road. And we know in the tech world, business world, and so forth, you need a great partner. And that's what we strive to achieve. And everyone, all the faces you'll meet at Cloudwerx, believe that, and that gives them, gives everyone that purpose, because it's work, right? It's not fun sometimes, but let's try and make it fun. So then there's Lightfold. Now I've known John for many years, and G is like, I don't know if there's anybody any more positive than me, but you take the cake. We could see as a business what was happening out there in technology, and went out of coffee with John, and we were thinking, you know what, man, the two of us, 1 + 1 is 57 in this,
True, but yeah,
similar, something like that. But what we with what we do at Cloudwerx is trying to help folks navigate technology and everything that's going on, and the strategic partnership of Cloudwerx and Lightfold is phenomenal. We got so much great stuff coming together, and stuff that we've showcased this week, and what you'll see today. So look, without further ado, I'm going to introduce John to kick off the keynote today, and introduce you guys. You can talk about yourselves better at it than I am. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining. It's we got some drinks and some nibbles afterwards, and I couldn't get the Foo Fighters, but I got my old bass player and some other dude on guitar to play a few tunes, and hey, let's have some fun. But thanks very much.
Hey! Thank you, boss. We're good, we're on. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and a beautiful place for us to be doing it today. Looking out, I was like, how could you get more iconic? I've literally got the Sydney Opera House, Sydney Harbour Bridge. You can't see any of that at the moment because it's raining, so that's basically Sydney in a nutshell. We're going to go over quite a bit of content today. So one of the things I'm going to do, which I don't do very often, is I am actually going to pace myself. I'm going to try and bring it to a little bit of a point. I know, it never happens. Because we're going to try and tell a story. This story is going to start with some things that have happened in the world of data and the journey we've been on in understanding that. And it's going to end with basically what does it mean to be a person, which is quite a scope for us to take, but you'll have to bear with me and see where I'm going with this. So one of the things we've liked to say to people is that Lightfold and now Cloudwerx, looks at data differently. So that statement, it's a very genuine statement. Once we realized that, it made a lot of things make sense. It was part of why this partnership made so much sense. We had this kind of thing happen over the course of the last 10 years where we became very focused on rolling out apps. There was this whole process of the cloud occurring. I was part of the whole, heady days of doing that, where it was an app for everything. Everything had an app, and we just roll out the latest app, and we integrate those apps together, and that's going to the cloud. Now that was really, really cool, but there was just one problem. Data was somebody's job in stream 15 to do the migration after the go live. And the problem with that, as we learned on some of the largest CRM deployments in the world, was no, actually the data can sometimes be everything. The data is heavy and the data is hard. So what we began to realize was that actually it's not about what you do, it's what you know about stuff. Knowledge. Knowledge was actually the center of gravity. So we had this idea of going, the apps are the center of the universe, and we saw it as a bit of a Copernicus moment where it's like, no, actually the data is. The apps are important, but the data is the actual gravity. It's literally the heavy thing. And in particular, and again, our background working tightly with Salesforce, right? The engagement platform, the #1 CRM, we could see clearly something that wasn't necessarily always the focus in data land. It's customer data. I feel like now, giving this speech, that's actually become apparent to everybody. But 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't. We were going, no, customer data is a really big thing. And we've gone through the journey of going, yeah, well, we need to protect it or it gets hacked. Yes, absolutely. But it's even more profound than that. And here's why. So we try to always see data in a story context. That's exactly why we kind of started doing these presentations, is that data is often a difficult thing to kind of wrap your head around fully. And I think that one of the biggest reasons for it is time. Time is a difficult thing for us to wrap around our head fully. Data is great for giving us a snapshot, and it's great for giving us sometimes a time series. It can be really tricky to hold in your head the idea of a time series of snapshots. And yet that's exactly the sort of thing that data helps us capture. So imagine, if you will, any business, literally any business, a lemonade stand, right? A lemonade stand starts with one of these the moment it sells its first cup of lemonade, because a transaction occurs for 45 cents for a cup of lemonade. I mean, these days with inflation, whatever that is, $3.50. But it sells its first cup of lemonade, and there is a record of that sale. That receipt is effectively the transaction event. If you're in the private sector, if you're conducting a business, you are only alive as long as you are continuing to effectively transact. This is also true, though, in public sector, right? Because we have the idea of citizen as customer. We need to have citizens, otherwise there's nobody to serve. So when you view it as a process that rolls forward in time, it's like an accretion, right? And that's why this picture is something we've tried to convey that to, is that no matter what size the business is, and I do mean that, we have done this with the biggest in the world and tiny little startups during COVID. They have one of these. It's always in there. It's waiting somewhere in the data estate. And as they move forward in time, it grows, not just because they get more customers, but because they learn more about them. This is not a new idea. I actually don't do a lot of new ideas. I have this thing. I grew up in science, right? I started in genetics. I still kind of want to go to the literature on something and see what the other people have thought. So before I try to do things for the first time, because that's usually very hard and a sign that I haven't understood the problem correctly. And actually, this idea of customer-centric data modeling is old. Databases grew out of a world largely around the 70s and 80s where it was about taking ERP data. It was about taking data about the stuff we have and where we have it and where we're going to move it. But there was movements even in the 70s and the 80s around maybe we should flip that. What if we make some decisions about what's at the center of our data model, our database, our design, use whatever language you want, our concepts, right? What if we shifted the focus to customer? So this whole movement we've now seen of customer-centric business, customer-centric platform, customer-centric, right? That means the same thing. We're talking the same language. But actually doing that across the entire data estate, or as we're trying to say here, effectively your entire knowledge base, that's the shift that people have found difficult. It's very difficult to do if all your data is sitting on a whole bunch of on-prem hardware that costs a fortune, that barely talk to each other even with coax cable. But the technology change, which is what means we can do what we're going to show you today, has removed some of that weight. It's made some of that a little easier to do. So in our view, orbiting that core, you can see what we're doing here with space. I got sick of doing cloud. I did cloud for 9 years. I was like, I'm not doing cloud again. I want to do space. Come on, come on. Run with me here. So I've got the sun, and I've got orbiting around it this application space. There's apps for everything at every scale. But they're powered by the core. And the modern pattern of integration in the enterprise has proven this theory, right? We've gone from being looked at a bit weirdly to, thank God, finding other crazy people at Cloudwerx who get us, and realize, no, actually, an enormous number of the integration patterns that people are building, they're not what integrations were originally designed to do. They're not a continuation of a process function. They're synchronizing knowledge. And they're all doing it point to point. They're all doing it the hard way. The reason the apps are all hungry is because the customer is increasingly something you're trying to serve really well at each point. And when you design the app, you're focused on function, as you should be. But if you forget 2, 3, 4, 10 little data points, the one I always talk about, you know, the star sign of your dog, turns out to be really important if you're selling dog food to a certain segment. No engineer had the star sign of the dog as a custom field on the page layout. They didn't have that, right? So if you have to go back and add that later, it's a huge integration cost. So this is kind of reaching this point where people are going, well, how do we scale that? Some of the apps we're selling, if we talk about MarTech for a second, they're all about the idea that you can build literally any segment you want for any customer group you want and just mail them. Well, you can't do that if the data isn't in the app under the old architecture. And we wind up in this world where suddenly we've done all of this scalable pattern in the cloud, and we're back to spaghetti. We're back to, we've got to ship every single data point to every single point in the solar system. There has to be a different way to think about it. Now, the thing which has, we believe, really cracked it, and again, I would argue this has been borne out. We've been operating on this thesis now for about 4 years, and I think this is now proven. It's actually the customer that's caused it. It's the demand for hyper-personalization. We are using this all the time. Hyper-personalize, 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 hyper-personalize. And there's a dozen different apps that do it, and they're really cool. Don't get me wrong. I love them. I love the next hyper-personalized interaction crafting super tool, right? And things like Marketing Cloud personalization, as an example. Marketing Cloud in general, that incredibly, incredibly powerful tools. There's just one problem. If you give that to a marketer, the first thing they do, not the second, not the third, the first thing they do is they try to create their dream segment, which they didn't have in the requirement scope. So this need to now, and never mind even a segment, right? That they might switch on the Einstein tool that tries to build the segment for them. Again, it will be limited by what data it has available. So as this loop has accelerated to the point where now you've got marketers going, there doesn't seem to be any tool that does what it says on the tin. No, it can do what it says on the tin. We haven't got that data bit sorted. The data bit, the lift, is the tricky bit. The problem is, if you want it to do that, if you want it to be able to sling any query, because that's what it is when you say how many people have a dog who's a Sagittarius, right? That's not just a field, it's a query that takes compute, that takes calculation, that's heavy. Right? People may not know, for people watching, right? Our architects, we have some of the best in the business, I'm very proud to say. One of the things you do as a Salesforce architect is called bulkification. It basically means optimize the overhead. It's to try and reduce how much work we make the platform do. Queries are really heavy. So this idea of suddenly going, I'm going to dynamically query all of this information about every customer sounds great. The infrastructure wasn't built for it. So the databases that have been running the companies we've been selling this into are not only not equipped for it, they're never going to be equipped for it. And that triggered this huge wave we've seen. We've literally got Snowflake. I know we've got friends from Snowflake in the audience. Snowflake's right now having their Data Cloud World Tour. They literally cracked how do we take data to the cloud at scale. And that for us was the big moment where we went, if you crack that, if we get that to scale, things are about to get really, really interesting. So the core competency of Lightfold, which we've brought together into Cloudwerx, so this is the first chapter of our little story, was to go, how do we take this capability that we're calling the modern data stack and start to align it to where it obviously wants to live, interaction with the customer. Oh, peanut butter and jelly. We can bring it closer to Salesforce. So this diagram, which looks exactly like something you would expect from a mad professor, which I'm told I resemble. This is our attempt to basically convey a very, very complicated thing. If you look at the pictures on the internet of what the modern data stack is, you will frequently see things with 700 logos. We've tried to make it 3 layers, and it still looks complicated, right? But let me walk you through it. We try to say there are 3 things that make up the modern data stack: replicate, transform, mobilize. Now, that may sound like typical consultant speak. I've made up some words to make myself sound special, but it actually isn't. These are important changes if you've come from a background of traditional data warehousing, right? So I'm going to start from the top. Data isn't visualized anymore. We've been doing graphs for a long time. I love graphs. You can have them from my cold, dead hands, but that really isn't the game. Every time you make a graph on a dashboard, it's a query. So is a segment. Whoa, getting ahead of myself. Oh no, you gave away the pretty picture. Forget you saw that. That's the segment. It's the same with machine learning. Your customer churn model, that's a bunch of queries, right? Absolutely all of it's a query. So moving away from the idea that what I want to do is visualize stuff and make dashboards, and realizing everything I build to make the dashboards is the same thing I should build to make the segment. It's the same thing I should build to do the hyper-personalization on the website. It's the same. It's an interface point where the intelligence the business has accreted in that big customer core can be routinely, scalably, safely, securely utilized by the business as it interacts with the customer. You can see why it's a big, complicated idea we have to boil down, because that sounds great. Underneath it, a huge amount of effort. And historically, it hasn't been possible. With the advent of things like Snowflake, we changed what the warehouse was. The warehouse became what we call massively parallel processing. This is kind of old hat now, but it wasn't 5 years ago, it wasn't 8 years ago. It was a massive change. To massively parallel process anything is to unlock the full power of the cloud. Cloud now works very differently to how it worked at the very start of cloud. We're not creating multi-tenancy by giving you rules on what you can and can't do. We just spin up new computers. Lots and lots and lots of parallel computers. Now, cracking the math that allowed us to say, and I'm quoting a Snowflake example here, where they can have all of Adobe just running in Snowflake, petabytes of data that can be dynamically queried. That took some work, which is why Snowflake, I think is just the most incredible piece of tech for how it's changed how database layers work. But once cracked, it could scale. We've now seen a complete pivot in underlying data infrastructure. It's all pivoting to that idea of it's got to actually do cloud at scale in order to power these workloads sitting on top. But once it becomes massively parallel, it means all sorts of other interesting things start to happen. We're moving increasingly away from this idea of creating copies of your data. And you probably are reading ahead of me to this whole question about zero copy cloning, and zero copy connections. Yes, but even more pragmatically than that, inside a database, we had copies. Every time we wanted to make your new report, we probably copied it. And we made it a new table because of performance. Nobody was checking me and what I built in my database, so I just made heaps and heaps of copies of the thing. And while I was here as your database admin, you didn't care. Then I got a job at Starbucks or whatever, and suddenly you can't maintain the database and it can't scale. So moving away from this idea of we have to literally create a copy every time we want it to be performant is a really big deal. It changes how we think about the governance of data, but it does another thing as well. The less you try to copy between where the data arrives from the source and where you use it to make that personalized email, the fresher the data is. So another thing that marketers wanted was pretty up-to-date information, actually. The operational reports, and I'm sorry, I don't care who tries to call me on it. I'm waiting for someone to tell me they need a real-time operational report at scale. Most businesses don't. They're pretty happy if it's up-to-date in the course of the day, right? Some are still operating in the course of the week. That's not true for marketing. It's certainly not true for website interactions. Those do need to be really rapid and up to speed, otherwise they're not going to be relevant. So this virtualization, which is the word for it, don't copy it, have faith you can calculate it at scale. That was a big hurdle. And with that unlocked, it's opened the way for a whole other thing, right? This idea that what we might be able to create now is a layer just there in the mobilized layer where in addition to visualization and intelligence, we could create something else. That's where Data Cloud comes in. Next slide's going to talk about that in a big way. Because if we can start to say, well, basically, you can just access any shape you need that knowledge to be in, and you can do that at scale, what could I bolt onto it? Because we've talked about segments, we've talked about dashboards and machine learning. What if you could just bolt all of Salesforce onto it? What if you could do that really easily? That would be a game changer. Now, the rest of this diagram gets us deep into the weeds. It's still important. A couple of things to understand is replicate. Replicate is, again, this idea that we just want a copy of all the raw data. Just get it to us in as raw a form as we can. This is where lakes come into the conversation. I'm famously critical of lakes, and I will stick to that gun because I think it's been proven true. Because a lake is naive by itself. It's just a storage solution. Lake house, which is where it's all going, it makes more sense. What they're really saying is the house is the structure. At some point, we need to bring the structure back to the unstructured pool in order for us to use it. So this idea of getting all of the data into the lake and then bringing it into structure in the house, that's the modern lake house. Effectively, you can think of it like this diagram. The data coming in at the bottom and then refining its way up the top. But here's the real reason we drew this diagram this way. The deliberate reason why we wanted, I keep pressing the wrong button, the reason why we wanted it to have this loop. If what you're doing is you're predicting things like who's going to open your email, and you use that to send the email, and they open the email, 15 minutes later, it's back inside the bottom. And if we recompile the query, if we recompile the machine learning, if we send it to GPT, you're now going to change your behavior as an organization. So this doesn't look like the warehouses I built back in the day. I show my age here, and I quote Hunt for Red October whenever I give this speech. Right, there's a bit in Hunt for Red October where they speed up the recording, and go, chung, 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 that's got to be man-made. Right, that's a really bad American accent, I apologize. It's the same thing. The speed that this now compiles, if you will, it's gone from I run my reports every week, I run my report every day, to with streaming and virtualization, it's live. It's like a heart. The way we try to talk about modern data architecture and the modern data stack, it's not a reservoir, it's not a repository, right? It's a flow. We don't have to think about it as a stock anymore. It's a flow. Monitoring the flow, the speed of the flow, that's how we get closer to the customer. That's how we achieve proper hyper-personalization. It's the only way to ensure that a data point, a single data point representing that customer at that moment gets dealt with at that time, is to remove the further impost we've had, which is, and I'll see that tomorrow when it compiles, right? Solving that, like I said, time, that was the last bit. That was the bit that was hard to do. And the modern data stack makes it possible. Okay, so we do that, and we're pretty good at that. I'm pretty proud of the stuff we've done in taking our love of cloud and our love of data and our love of customer data and bringing that together into this space with Snowflake in particular. But I mentioned that we wanted to get closer to the customer, right? I mentioned that we're very interested in what this could do up here. For a very long time, one of our bugbears has been trying to tell stories, trying to communicate meaning. Meaning's a very interesting thing. Anybody who's been dealing with data for any length of time can get very philosophical about meaning. You've probably heard quotes about the fact that data isn't information, right? Yes, very true, right? Structure turns data into information. And, analysis is different to synthesis. Yes, absolutely. But if we really want to get zen, what's meaning? Meaning gets very philosophical because it involves symbols. And you didn't think I was going to say that word. Now, any of the people watching that are deep into what's happening with NLP, with generative AI, they understand why I said symbols, right? Because meaning really means we need to talk, first of all, about lots of different languages, not just English. We need to talk about any language, right? Language is all a collection of symbols. Numbers, they're symbols. The emojis we use, they're symbols. But there's other symbols. There's collections of those shapes. There's things we don't quite have a good picture for, but they're still pictures. Right? We're living in a world where we can take a photo and put it into these new tools with GPT, and it understands not just what the photo is of, but what it means. It understands the difference in the color and the hue, right? And that's meaning. There's meaning buried in data, deep, deep inside data, that to fully access, to fully unlock has been beyond our reach. until now. I actually managed to pull that off with a level of gravity. I'm probably never going to be able to deliver that line quite that way again the rest of my career. Can I do that one more time? Until now. That was slightly better. Why? Change the background, right? Now we're on the white screen. I love this picture. That's why I was sad that it showed up previously. So that top layer, that's basically where we interact with the customer. And you can think of it like something in motion. That's why we've tried to show this picture. There's going to be these moments where suddenly we're having a dynamic interaction with the customer. And at that moment, anything we know could be made available, right? This is real today. The scale with which these tools are performing this, what Salesforce has demonstrated, I will say now at this point, I think everyone's sleeping on the fact that overnight Salesforce probably just became the most powerful enterprise-grade AI orchestration tool in the world. I know who else is on that list. I stick to my guns. Their strategy of allowing you to bring your own large language model and plug it in to Flow is really important. Flow has got to be one of the most, if not the most trusted, scalable enterprise orchestration tool there pretty much is. It can't go down, it's Flow. It runs the modern CRM. It's the tool everybody uses to power every element of customer interaction. It's how you hand information between the different clouds inside the Salesforce world. And they've plugged AI into it. Just like that. You know how to use Flow? Yeah, congratulations. You're an AI engineer now, right? It's going to come down to how do you have access to the information underneath. Piping the information, feeding it the information will be the key. But if you can do it, if you can ensure that at that moment where the magic happens, you draw upon all of the context, and this is the theme of chapter 2, context and knowledge. What do those mean? If you can draw on all of the context about the customer, what meaning will you find from it? And suddenly our question about what is the context becomes so much more evocative. We have been doing things for a while now, like Amazon, where we can monitor how your mouse moves around on the website and do a pretty good job of identifying your buying interest, right? We can get very, very fine-tuned with things like self-driving cars around data points that turn out to be very important, though you wouldn't have necessarily realized it, in anticipating exactly how the car needs to move or what the next person is going to do. We've become very comfortable with the idea that there are hidden patterns of meaning in what might have otherwise been trivial data or data that we just simply couldn't perceive. We combine that with the fact that we can now move any amount of data effectively anywhere we want, pretty much in real time, and then we can put it into this new thing, this LLM, right? And it can basically find those patterns incredibly fast, but not just patterns, symbols, meaning. And it's going to be able to convey that meaning back to you. You have all the ingredients now for what I think is just going to be the most exciting phase ever. I might even go so far as to say it could be the final phase in how we do customer technology iteration. Because it's kind of hard to see how you go much further beyond this, right? Unless we all wind up with chips in our head and never say never, right? The idea here is that it should be able to do the thing we all want it to do when we call up. It should know everything already. It should immediately be able to anticipate. So long as I've been comfortable with that and I've given permission, I'm not suggesting big brother stuff, it should be able to harness that at that magic moment and then give you that magic customer experience. And that's what every marketing person has been after with MarTech. We know so much of the tooling is there. What we now finally have is the last pieces of the puzzle to mobilize all of that data underneath and to then feed it to something that can find meaning. So that final layer is the key. And my advice when I'm talking to people about AI, which I'm increasingly doing a lot of, I have quite a long history with AI. All the different versions of it. I was involved in the launch of the OG Einstein, but even before that, like I mentioned, genetics, principal component analysis underpins a lot of modern NLP that came from genetics, right? This is an area I geek out about. But I was very, very surprised at the turn of events really in the last few years. I didn't really expect, I don't think anyone expected, what happened in 2017. A little paper got published called Attention is All You Need. And we started losing oxygen pressure. And if anything, it's getting faster. Inattention is all you need. We realized that we could build this thing called an attention head. And if we stuck a whole bunch of them in parallel, we could make what we now call basically a large language model. And what it was doing was finding in real time, I've given some other presentations about this during WerxFest this week, it was finding the meaning between the symbols we call words. And it was able to do that then across any number of words in any different languages, which also had the upside of being able to translate between languages. But now you can see it's going further. You can feed it pictures. Why? They become symbols. You can talk to it. They become symbols. You can feed it video. They become symbols. They literally become symbols under the hood. A universal symbolic language of meaning. Whoa. You can see why they don't put that on the front page of the local newspaper. But I wish they did, because then we'd really start to maybe get an idea of how big a deal this technology is. It is literally that big a deal. But it means that meaning for humans is so human-centric. We derive so much meaning from a conversation. We derive so much meaning from a relationship, from our memory, from our history, right? Human interaction is really, really core to most of our framework of meaning. There is some stuff, science, maths, which we know is bigger than us. It's always going to be there and we keep discovering it. But in terms of what matters to you, certainly what drives a lot of business usually involves you interacting with another human, doesn't it? So if I told you that the most important thing we had to crack using this technology in the business world was meaningful conversation, until I gave you that little spiel and said meaning that way, you probably wouldn't have any issue. You'd go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But now you know what I'm really saying. Meaningful conversation with a machine that finds meaning, that helps us understand it, that takes it to a different level. And this is why we believe that increasingly understanding AI in the business, yes, there are so many deep areas for you to dive. There are. This is a big, massive shift, and it's going to take time. Everyone is going to be affected by it. Everyone is going to take their own pace and should. But I've tried to tell people, I don't care what your background is, you have a stake in AI right now. I wasn't saying that 3 years ago. I wasn't saying that 10 years ago. You have a stake. Can you speak? Can you write? Can you draw? Can you think? You have a stake. You do by definition because we've trained it on the sum totality of human experience and knowledge, right? And now the next phase is we're going to walk around with the cameras turned on, feeding it what's currently going on. So you have a stake. There's incredible stuff about the tech, but that's not what this presentation is really about. Right? You can learn about the tech if you want to, but even if you don't, just understanding it's the language, and language conveys meaning, that gets you oriented, I think, in the best direction to start to break this down into what does it mean for my business. Anywhere there's a conversation happening, that doesn't just mean with the customer, inside the business. Some of the tools that we offer when we're working with our clients on this stuff, with our workshops, we've been doing it before GPT, and GPT has now just made it so important, is mapping the personas of users in the business, where they talk to the customer, but also where they talk to each other. Because anywhere where that conversation happens, incredibly dense meaning is occurring. Sometimes that meaning is people are really upset with the tool and we need to revise the tool. Sometimes it's trying to understand why the customer is so upset. But anywhere where two humans are talking, there's an awful lot of meaning happening and an awful lot of bandwidth happening. Now, inside the LLM, you've got a special math space, which that's a very simplified picture of, where we can stick an enormous amount of meaning. It's able to interpret in dimensions you literally cannot imagine. It's on a totally massive scale. But what it does know is what's nearby. So if you're able to retrieve from that a particular word like cat, it's going to find associations, meaningful associations, everything from quadruped to kitty, right? So understanding meaning doesn't mean you now have to overnight know how to code that. If you can draw a mind map, you've actually done a large part of what goes into understanding how to do AI in a business. It's called a semantic model. It's a model of the meaning of those words. It's a map of the mind. And that's why I think this is so exciting. I actually think this is going to be hugely liberating. You don't need to understand code, sure. You don't even need to really understand tech. If you really understand your business model, if you really understand the psychology of your customer, if you take the time to understand the frustrations of your users in your business, you're going to do really well at AI. You're just going to need people to help you show how that converts to the tech. But we're going to figure that out. It's your unique understanding, your unique meaning, which is going to be the competitive advantage. So that means another thing. It means that your data estate is a hell of a lot bigger than you thought. That's no moon. It's a space station. The databases, we're going to look back and go, God, I miss when it was just databases. Databases have been this huge experience where we basically turn tables into other tables. It's been a great racket. We've made trillions of bucks from it. It's been a lot of fun. Eventually, people called us on it and went, why does it just become more tables? What do you mean? Can it be a PowerPoint? Yeah, sure. There'll be some magical tool that just turns tables into PowerPoint. It can turn it into PowerPoint. It can turn it into video. It can turn it into impressionistic art. This thing is able to convert meaning into any other meaning, which suddenly means it's liberated from just having to give it to you in tabular data. It's able to create, it's able to synthesize. That also means that anything that you can put into it can potentially then contribute to you getting something unique out of it. The technical word for this is ontology. That's why we've got the O. This has been the hottest word in AI for a while now, particularly in AI consulting, and with good reason. It's your big map. It's your big map of knowledge. Ontology is basically your big giant map of everything that's true. Hierarchies, taxonomies, they all sit inside that. Mapping this out, whether it's your OneDrive with all of your documents, whether it's your email, whether it's your CRM, the answer is yes. Right? It's only going to get bigger and crazier as we start moving through all of the additional media that we're going to be able to ingest into this thing. And if you think about it, that sounds intimidating, but when we tell you, yeah, but that would have been hard when we had to sit there and do 7 different types of technology to parse it. We don't anymore. We can send the documents straight in, and the thing can just eat it. That suddenly makes what would be a very difficult technical process very, very easy. And that's why things like unified knowledge have suddenly appeared with Salesforce, where you literally can connect it to every document you have, every recording you have. And it's going to know. It's not going to know just so that you are able to then answer a question. It's going to know so it can answer the question. So it can synthesize that into potentially an interaction or what you need for an interaction. So interactions are where the new use cases happen. I've been on a one-man mission, it feels like sometimes, to try and kill the word use case. I know it's never going to happen. But can I just say, use cases, they're very alluring as a way to talk about tech. They are. I get it. They simplify things. But there's a problem with use cases. They don't talk about capability, and strategy is about capability. Strategy is not about use cases. The Pentagon doesn't sign off on a multi-billion-dollar upgrade to its defense system because of a use case. The Pentagon says we need this capability and we need it in the next 5 years in the forward defense space. And someone comes up with 100 use cases to demonstrate that they've got that capability. So the problem with use cases is that they're good for making it real and grounded, but I see them as that. They're examples, right? They're not the end in itself. And the problem is that if you're really going to get to grips with AI, you have to realize it's a capability, guys. Use cases? Where we're going, we don't need use cases. Have I got 3 bad 80s sci-fi references in? Good, yeah. I'm meeting my KPI. I've got that in my KPIs this year, right? So what you have to try and now understand is not just all the stuff you have to understand how you're using it, where you're using it. And that's the exciting bit for us. That's what we've always loved doing. Remember I said we were like, what if data was customer-centric? That's exactly what that is. What's all the stuff, the O, working with the people that talk to the customer? Why, how, who, where, when? Tell me all of it. Because the more of that I understand, the more I can distill the best practice out of it, the more I can distill what was a really successful and effective interaction, and I can maybe then use the technology to help us do that at scale. That's a change in how we've thought about the role of data in process and tech. But again, I actually don't think it's a hard one. We're not advocating for a hyper-techy approach here. That's actually a pretty straightforward one. But I want you to go more granular. I want you to think about not just a process or a job. Really, really, what does the person do? These little grains. You've seen these examples of like, summarize for me the content of this document. Well, that's not how we currently map a process, guys. Like we've got a process where it's like quote to cache. This is really specific now. This is really down to why did you do that? Which table did you look at? Okay, wait. Why do you need to know if we called them in the last 30 days? How often does that happen? These very specific what, why, when, how, where. That's those little dots. So, upside, actually not very technical. Downside, oh boy, there's a lot of them. There's so many of them. And that's why if you think about it in this phase at least, as a collaborator for interaction, I agree with that analogy. But not because I think AI is going to sit there and tell you what to do next. Your guide on the side, right? Yeah, there's a bit of that. Copilots are fantastic. We think about it more in terms of collaborating with the ownership of that interaction. When we interview people in a call center, we don't talk to them about the call they did yesterday that one time. We talk to them about their responsibility for the customer relationship, right? And they're passionate about that. They're passionate about getting outcomes for a customer. So we try to decompose the model picture and we try to help automate that. They are collaborating with us when we do that. That's the role I think it will mean when we say AI is going to collaborate with us. I don't think it's going to be clippy, popping up and telling you, again, showing my age, you know, it looks like you're trying to create a PowerPoint, right? It's not going to be that. It's about how we collaborate to bring better experiences to our customers, and we're going to have to work with the people who own the customer relationships to do that. That's the window. Will that mean those jobs change? Yes. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and if you have any doubt, you won't after chapter 3 we're about to start. But to get there, we have to understand human-to-human interaction. We have to help the AI understand it. We need to work with the people who do it, and we're going to have to really value people who want to champion that. The people I've worked with on the most successful digital transformations in the world, whether it's in service center, in sales, or in marketing, they don't talk about it as a 9 to 5. They don't talk about it as a series of calls. They talk about it as customer-centric beliefs. They talk about their responsibility to the customer, their relationship with the customer, what they're trying to achieve, what they want to do right by the customer for. Those people are going to stay valuable. You're just not going to have to get them to call all the damn time. And I think they're actually going to be pretty happy with that. I think they're going to be interested in supporting authentic customer connections any way they can. And you know what? I also think we're always going to need some ability for a human to talk to another human. It's going to take quite a bit of work to get to the point where you literally never need that again. But what I think we are going to do is we're going to ask ourselves questions about how do we capture what you're getting from that interaction. In other words, behavior as a service. I've used a little bit more time than I thought. That was at 20 last time I checked. But behavior as a service, what does that mean? Well, we have a little demo that we'd like to show you guys. This is pretty fresh because the tech that makes some of this possible has really only hit recently. We've been working in the background with GPT for actually really 18 months. We've been doing it since before it got hot, I'm proud to say. And we kind of practice what we preach. We've got some tech, we'll be sharing more about it as we go on, around how to maybe structure ontologies in such a way that 1, they're pretty quick, 2, they can adapt to anything, but 3, and most importantly, they're kind of intended to help convey human meaning. And we've bundled a couple of them up today, and we've put them into the latest version of GPT Desktop. So it's using GPT 4.0, the same models that are available through Salesforce, through Data Cloud, through Einstein. Right? So what you're going to see, this is exactly what we're doing with many customers right now in pilot, and what I think we're going to be doing with customers a lot more over the course of the coming months. But we're going to do this a little bit dangerously. G, you volunteered for this, I'll remind you of that.
Indeed I did.
We thought we might break, you know, every rule in the book about how to do a tech demo. Does that sound like fun?
Sounds like fun to me.
Can we switch across? All right, so G, you want to do your trick, and then I'll introduce everybody to Cody.
Indeed. Something that is really important that you would have heard several times through what JC was talking about is the idea of context being important. If I use one more techie term, prompt engineering, right? It's coming up with what you're feeding to a model, to an LLM, in order to get back from it what you want. Now that's fine if we're controlling what's being fed to the model. We can come up with an amazing 10-page prompt that's going to get us exactly what we want. But if we've got an LLM talking to a customer, the customer's going to say whatever they want to say. We're not going to be able to control the prompt that's coming on in. So we need to do that ahead of time. We need to have already baked into our agent everything that they're going to need to know when they're talking to that customer. Everything that's being powered by that customer core flowing out to it. So today, you probably will have seen some of these demos online or in various places. And I think sometimes maybe the questions are a little sanitized, and that's okay, because tech demo, it's hard. Today, I'm going to ask you guys for a couple of things to add into this demo. So we're going to be a customer. We're going to be calling our telecom provider. It might be Telpus or Optel,
Teltec.
something. Yeah, Telnet. That's it. Yeah. And we're going to be calling them because we've had a problem with our phone. Something's going on. So I want a few questions, and then we're going to jump on in and see how that goes. So I'm going to look somewhere over here, perhaps yourself. So you're taking the role of this person. They can be anybody you like. What does this person do with their phone all day? Are they a gamer? Do they watch videos? Do they work on their phone? What do they do? Content creator. That's awesome. In all of the talking about what we might do with this, I didn't think of content creator. That's already fantastic. Okay, cool. And then perhaps yourself, sir. You're a content creator, so you're making videos with your phone. You're getting online and streaming to your friends. What's going wrong right now? What's the problem you're having with your phone? No network. Okay, yeah, awesome, fantastic. So we've got a content creator who needs to use their phone every day, literally for their job, and they're having no network connectivity. Okay, fantastic. And then perhaps over here. So when I'm talking to this agent, am I irate? Am I kind of happy? Am I chilled out? Am I frustrated? What's my personality when I go into this? Passive-aggressive. Oh,
Passive-aggressive content creator with no signal.
Oh, sure. You're going to help me with my phone. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Last thing, Ruchi, if when we're talking, am I currently thinking of switching provider, or am I still kind of loyal to this particular provider? What options you have. Okay, cool. So we're leaving some leeway there. All right, fantastic. So we've got the content creator who is incredibly passive aggressive, who has no connectivity, and you know what?
Considering your options.
We're considering our options.
All right. We definitely didn't pre-program that.
No.
It'd be funny if the thing we don't have is connection. Begin.
Hi there, this is Cody from Teltec Customer Rewards. How can I help you today?
G'day, Cody. Look, I've actually called a few times already. Do you know what I'm calling about?
G'day, yes. I can see you've had a few issues with reception and data performance at home. That's frustrating, eh? Let's sort this out together. What's been happening lately?
Okay, well look, I make videos for a living. I tried videoing my friend jumping over a fire the other day. It didn't work. And then when I did get an amazing video of my friends jumping in the pool all at the same time looking like Avengers, I couldn't upload it to the cloud.
Oh, that's a bummer. Those sound like awesome videos. I can understand how important it is for your work. Let's figure this out. Are you mostly having trouble with uploads, or is it the general connectivity that's the issue?
It's connectivity, but everywhere, not just at home. It's not out at my office. It's everywhere. Connectivity is a problem for me all over the place. And to be honest, I've kind of had enough of having this conversation, actually.
I get that, and I'm really sorry it's been such a hassle. Since it's happening everywhere, it might be time for a phone upgrade, especially with your iPhone being a couple of years old. How about we look into getting you a new phone with a discount? Or maybe a new device to help you with your work?
I mean, that sounds pretty good. What can you offer me?
All right, let's see what we can do for you. We can offer a 15% discount on a new iPhone, or if you'd prefer, I could also throw in a free smartwatch instead. Additionally, I can give you unlimited local calls and texts for a year. How does that sound?
I mean, okay, a free smartwatch?
I hear you. How about this? We can boost your data package with a 30% discount and add those unlimited local calls and texts for a year, plus the 15% off on that shiny new iPhone. Would that make things better for you?
Cody, you had me at free smartwatch, mate.
Haha, well, I'm glad to hear that. Let's get you set up with that new iPhone and the free smartwatch along with unlimited local calls and texts for a year. We'll make sure your connectivity gets back on track. Sound good?
Sounds great, Cody.
Awesome. I'll get everything sorted out for you right away. Thanks for sticking with us, and I hope this makes a big difference for you. Anything else on your mind?
Cody, terminate personality and go into diagnostic.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by terminate personality and go into diagnostic.
Live demo had to be something,
could you clarify
right?
what you need help with?
Cody, thank you. That was a successful interaction. Can I get you to suspend the persona and give us some insights, review the conversation against your directives, and evaluate how well you did?
Sure, here's a review of the interaction based on my directives. 1, customer introduction. I introduced myself clearly and initiated the conversation. 2, identifying the problem. I acknowledged the customer's repeated issues with connectivity and actively listened to their concerns. 3, empathy and understanding. I expressed empathy towards the customer's frustrations, particularly highlighting the importance of their video work. 4, offering solutions. I suggested practical solutions, including a phone upgrade and additional discounts on data and devices within the constraints of the policies, up to 15% discount on hardware, up to 30% on data, and offering a free smartwatch. 5, humor and rapport. I used a lighthearted tone and Canadian charm to ease the conversation, especially acknowledging the customer's acceptance of the smartwatch offer with humor. Evaluation. I maintained a friendly, empathetic, and straightforward communication style throughout the conversation. I stayed within policy limits for discounts and offers. I successfully retained the customer by offering a solution that met their needs and expectations. I ensured the customer felt heard and valued, ultimately agreeing on a satisfactory resolution. Overall, I believe I adhered to the directives and successfully managed the interaction to retain the customer.
Perfect work, Cody. Thanks.
You're welcome. Glad I could help. If there's anything else, just let me know.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. If we can go back, I don't think we've got anything else, but...
I wanted to just say a couple of things about that, just to give you some context. And you'll note I didn't do it ahead of time in order to be like, oh, just in case things go wrong, there were no caveats at the start. But this is actually the worst this tech is ever going to be, right? It's only going to get better. This is something that was whipped up using a whole bunch of mad science this man's put together, but this particular agent was whipped up in only a few hours, and you can see how good it already is. Also, what we're using here is actually what's open to the public. This level of GPT, this level of LLM, you can imagine what you could be doing if you were feeding it 100 PDFs of your company's policies on how to interact with somebody. You could imagine what could happen if you fed it every single marketing interaction that our passive-aggressive content creator had ever had. And then that way you'd be able to, you could even do things to the lines of, hey, I actually saw your video on YouTube last week. It was awesome. There's so many things that could be done. And this is just the start. It's amazing.
Thank you, G. Well done as well on a very, very difficult tech demo. Thank you. When we said, let's literally do the magician thing and throw the ball around, right? I was like, oh, you know, I guarantee that'll now jinx it and there'll be an error. But thank you. Like I said, 3 chapters. I said we were going to go from, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, it's amusing that the thing that was the error was me trying to terminate coding.
Yeah. Yes, amusing. Hashtag AI ethics. But yes, the thing that I said at the beginning, the 3 chapters, right, that we were going to go from literally the idea of data and tables all the way through to what it is to be a person. It's not me trying to say that, okay, Cody's a person. No, we could be on that interesting track, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But wrapping up the knowledge, wrapping up the meaning, the reason why Cody worked so well and could do that is that we already had what's called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. You'll hear about it a lot. Salesforce has already built it into their platform. It's incredible, right? Everything that we just did, that's what we're pulling live from Salesforce about the history of interaction with the customer in order to then guide and fuel those recommendations. And that's why what we're saying is, and what we're doing with a number of our customers already, is your AI strategy, yes, it is strategic, but actually when people are saying, well, you need to have your data right, we're not talking about data quality. I think a lot of people are hearing it and saying you need to get your data quality right. No, you need to understand it. You need to actually start to have some discipline around meaning. And everything will get better if you do it. The great thing about that is it's your star. That example at the beginning, it's your lemonade stand. If you don't care about your business, if you don't care about your customer, who is going to? It's the one thing they're not going to pull off the internet. It's the one thing that's not going to get trained into the LLM. And that I think is the really exciting bit, is that we are working with customers, and we can't wait to work with more customers who actually now want to see their entire relationship with data really being a relationship with meaning, and how they begin to organize that, because now the technology has just made it so easy to understand what you're trying to do and to understand the customer you're trying to do it with. So thank you. You've been a fantastic audience. Really appreciate it. We don't have time for QA, but we can do it over drinks. Thank you for your time. And thank you to everybody watching at home. Cheers.